Hello again, everybody. Today we're talking about armor for Viking reenactment. Anyways, it's an often discussed topic about protecting yourself when doing Viking reenactment battle. So this video, I want to try to be a little more specific when it comes to what kind of armor we're talking about and what kind of fighting we're talking about, to kind of set the stage for what I personally do with the groups I'm involved in. I do have some awareness of what other groups do, armor-wise, combat-wise. I do come from a beginner's HEMA background, where when we fight, we wear lots of gear, as opposed to Viking reenactment, which you quite often see people going at it with steel weapons, hardly any gear at all, sometimes no gear, that's on them. But so this video is not particularly for those folks. First couple things that I want to talk about protection wise that I feel are mandatory, but not mandatory when you're practicing. But we've had some horror stories. I will even add a couple photos right now. Of a head injury on myself. I got an axe to the head, and it wasn't even a committed strike. The person who did it didn't mean to do it. We were simply showing how to stand, how to hold a weapon. Even then, something as simple as the axe kind of coming down, someone slipping. And truly what happened is that they were bracing a shield with their axe in their hand. Their hand slipped off the shield. When we were pushing on the shield to show resistance, axe slipped out and hit the pusher. So you can see that was a pretty mean injury. There's even more aftermath to it. Another photo I'll show now. So as you can see, that became quite a black eye. It's a cool story to say he took an axe to the head, but not even. So first and most important part of gear all the time is your head. Always your head. Now, one of the issues with being a Viking reenactor, you really only have two helmet options. You have the nasal helm and the spectacle helm. So when you wear those, it's quite obvious the openings you have. You have a lot. There's a lot of problems with this. There's a lot of chances of it getting in your eye. Your mouth is still susceptible. Jawbone, your ear, maybe not so much your ear with straps, but your ears, the back of your head. These types of helmets seem to just address the top of your head or your cranium. One thing that helps, and it's not a solution I'm presenting, is having an arming cap. If you get one that's not oversized at the very least. The arming cap, even with all this long hair of mine, it'll actually cover your ears pretty well, and it provides some back of the head protection. So the arming cap does add quite a bit to your helm's protection. It'll actually create a better fit too. I have hardly any wobble while wearing this. This is kind of more of a World War I style suspension system that they added to this. I won't get into the history of if there were straps or not, or suspension systems. It's not what we're discussing. We're discussing combat today in a reenactment setting. Choreography or not, right? So head protection, big one. Still don't have any jawbone protection, don't have any throat protection. So I have a couple things I can present right now in regards to that. And for me, big issue with Viking reenactment combat is that we have a risk of kind of having bad aesthetics if we wear things that are maybe out of period or modern gear even. I think the general public's a little more forgiving than some of us reenactors would like to believe when it comes to us protecting ourselves. They love the violence, but they don't require blood. It's not really a thing. We can even look back into the Colosseum, right, and the gladiators. good amount of those fights were choreography. So wearing a fencing mask, if you're really going to bout with a friend, but you're in the rest of your kit, guys are looking great, and you're wearing some of this other protection that I'm about to mention, fencing mask, I'm starting to come around to it because these Viking helmets do not protect your teeth, protect your eyes, and we are American reenactors, so some of us just don't have health care. And I don't mean to say people outside the US have it made. I understand there's wait times and just things that come along with getting injured. But still, we don't want to risk your line of work, function of your body. We all like the bruises. It seems that reenactors or SEA people and fighters that get into HEMA or Western martial arts are a little more okay with getting their butts whooped a little bit. We kind of like our scars. It's a little bit of a souvenir from the weekend of camping and fighting with our friends. We don't mind it. Even a busted lip here and there, not a big deal. The head injury, not a big deal. So you can see I'm fine. Pretty gruesome photos though, weren't they? So headgear. If I had just been wearing my helmet, not the most comfortable thing, right? But when I was showing our new member these techniques, I should have at least had it on, because we did have a weapon in hand. You know, when we're demonstrating or discussing this stuff with steel weapons, might I add. So I'm okay not having my head guarded if we're just practicing cuts with each other and we're using, you know, wood and things like that, but not at each other. You know, wood sword can really hurt your head. Not particularly what I'm trying to discuss, but helmet-wise, you don't want to get these Viking reenactment helmets that are super thin. There's a lot out there that are 18 gauge. They advertise 18 gauge, right? Because one portion of that helmet is 18 gauge or 16 gauge, other portions are not, and you can't quite tell. So let's say this was, which is not, a crappy costume one, and they said that the 16 gauge helmet, and around my main band I see 16 gauge, but with this construction you can't really confirm how much the actual shell itself is the gauge they're claiming. This is a more semi-reputable brand. Get Dressed for Battle. They're not great for a lot of things, but a couple of their helmets are really well made. This one is really thick, actually. This one's got 12 gauge, and then it's got 14 gauge, which is nice. This thing has taken some full-hearted blows when it wasn't on a head, and even then, like, it's not taking on a lot of dents. What's nice is try to look for one that's mild steel. A lot of these stainless ones that are made out of fancier new metals, they never tarnish. You look kind of funky. Imagine seawater. You know, I don't recommend aging your gear. Let your gear age on its own. But get something like mild steel. This isn't bad for what it is. It's like a $90 helmet. They have variants with the spectacle, similar price. And an arming cap's like 12 bucks. Should really always have an arming cap. As a matter of fact, I wear an arming cap under my fencing mask. Helps. It's washable, so I'm not sweating out my mask, creating bacterial issues, and it creates a better fit. It truly does. And I think it would help too with the sound deadening. When I wouldn't wear it and I'd take a longsword hit to the ear, it wasn't fun. Even at half speed, not fun. But not to ramble on too much. We're trying not to whack each other in the head either. To let me preface that. We really don't aim for the heads. We just don't. There's just too much that can go wrong. And the helmets, they have an inherent design to deflect the blows. So if someone did strike really hard to the head, it's just gonna slide down, hit your collarbone, things like that. So working downwards, we don't have any neck protection, but we should at least protect our head, our nose. So while we're on the subject of head, a mouth guard. Absolutely have a mouth guard. If you're breathing really heavy, chances are your tongue isn't where it should be. If you take a bad hit to your fencing mask, close your jaw onto your tongue. Not a good thing. This will help you maintain your bite. It'll make your teeth not actually able to really sever a tongue as easily, but you still can. There still has been issues with that. A mouth guard's like a $7 investment. You can size them with hot water. Some of you who did sports as a kid, I'm sure, have had mouth guards. Definitely wear one. They could even help with impact on the front. If you did take a steel weapon, it might actually save a tooth or two. So moving slightly downward, here we have a modern gorget. So this is from South Coast Swords. They rebrand this as Lynx, but it's a company called Superior Fencing out of Pakistan, and they co-pack or I guess, private label for quite a few other HEMA brands. But this provides the minimal protection you would require in steel sparring with HEMA. But if you were to wear something like a gambeson, or the next thing I'll show you, aesthetically you could probably get away with hiding this, and it is really important that we protect our throats. It doesn't take a lot to break your windpipe. That could be extremely devastating. Rewatching fight footage, I've seen quite a few weapons come within inches of eyes, inches of teeth, inches of the throat. Everywhere else is already bad as it is, so I worry about that. But hiding a gorget is actually not all that bad if you're wearing a hood, right? So if you're gonna wear your Viking hood, you wear your hood down, wear your helmet on top. Your hood will kind of bunch up here, but I've tried it with mine. You do not see this, so that's really cool. I really have no opposition to wearing modern gear. I'm really trying to maintain an aesthetic when we do demonstrations, and don't really want anyone to see anything that they shouldn't. But there's gray areas. We can't be wearing fancy masks. Another thing for neck protection and collarbone, although this is black, if we were to wear this for what we do, I'd go for brown or natural color. This is like a thick canvas, like gambeson-like material. It's pretty thick. This is the Lord of Battles is the brand. It's from Cult of Athena. This provides quite a lot of protection. For about 25 bucks, you're getting a lot of extra collarbone, and to wear this over a regular tunic could really get the job done. And I did experiment with the gorget under this. It can work, it was just a little hinky. You can fold these collars down, but in combination with your arming cap, and your helmet, we're starting to get a lot more well-rounded protection. Now you can see the back of my head, my neck. Sorry, you probably can't hear me. You can see the back of my head and my neck are now pretty well protected. And I've actually started to close in my jawbone quite a bit more. So we're getting a little closer there, right? And we're not breaking aesthetic. With a mouth guard, with hard throat protection. This provides actually a decent amount of throat protection, except right in the dead center. So if you were to get hit dead center, it would suck. But the blade catch would be halfway decent here, but you're not getting any hard protection like this would provide. So this under here is a little difficult, but still, maybe you can wear the hood. Just trying to cover some gaps without making you guys look too modern with your fighting, or look too, later period. The arming cap's a must. You got to. And a helmet. And then we really got to protect our throat and our teeth. When we're not just like training techniques with like a stick with each other and showing someone, a strike holding the shield. As long as we're not doing it opponent on opponent. We're kind of coach and student, where someone can, perform a move and they're not trying anybody. They're fighting air. Staying out of the way of your student, things like that. Then, let's not wear the gear. Really, I'm not that worried about it. But when it comes to fighting someone you haven't met from another group, you're like, hey, let's just have a friendly sparring session. You never know how far or how hard they're going to go. And of course, you're going to stop when they be complete assholes about it. But at least the gear you wore saved you the drama of them injuring you. And that's a hard way to make a friend right away, isn't it? Thankfully, the person who chopped me in the head with the axe, I care about quite a bit. So, it wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't. So to skip down slightly a bit, because we're talking about hiding modern under our period authentic for you men. Now, this is one that I like. I have another one that I'm ordering. Just groin protection. I have no brand preference to share with you. Just wear it. It's not that hard to pop into your tent and pop one of these on. I took some strikes that were about that far away from vital materials on my body with a spear. And in HEMA, we don't even worry all that much about forearm protection. A lot of people don't worry about upper body really at all. They're really worried about throats and that mask and the back of the head protection. That stuff is super mandatory. Some guys fight with very light jackets. Some folks don't even wear padded pants. But wearing an elbow guard, wearing knee pads, I feel is pretty needed. Let's get into the aesthetics for a second. We see a lot of Western martial arts guys and Eastern martial arts guys in the Viking era, right? But we see them with very big van braces and the elbow guards, which good on them because that's really important. The fact that it's showing kind of hurts aesthetic. And I know it's not going to be a popular opinion that I'm sharing right now, but some of the over armoring in the visual sense doesn't give a lot of justice to what, or better yet, the seriousness of Viking combat. And not to downplay the seriousness of any other type of combat, that we're talking about a very specific age in European warfare's history where there wasn't a lot of armor whatsoever. And I don't really preface that based off of how few helmets we have and things like that. If you could protect yourself, you would. But really, we're not in a very heavily armored age. You even start to look towards the Crusades. We start to see plate armor, lots of mail. Mail was very expensive. Helmets were very expensive. It's a big misconception about how many swords were on the battlefield or in a skirmish or in a raid that the Scandinavian Vikings were carrying. Not very many. So a lot of these battles, I don't see enough spears. I see too much armor. I'm not trying to be a total elitist, but if we're trying to give the public an image of at least what it could have been like, and finding that middle zone between choreography and complete chaos. I don't want to see us fighting like fancy sword and buckler fencers or foil saber fencers. There's a lot of crazy brutal prowess that was described of the Viking warrior. There really was. At the same time, not a lot of gear. Not a lot of gear at all. And our weapons tell a lot of that history. The reason that we don't have hand guards on most of our weapons, the reason that the shield was paired with stuff, there just wasn't hand protection. There wasn't a lot of body protection at all. Like, we see the shield almost disappear when full armor comes into play. We do see it, of course, but just the need for it became far, far less. So it'd be a better representation to represent ourselves in more soft armor. Even mail is a bit overkill. I wouldn't like to see a whole battle line of 10 guys in mail. I'd like to see 2 guys in mail, the rest of the guys in basic gear, or the next thing we're going to show. The obvious gambeson, which we know isn't particularly a Viking thing, right? We don't have the evidence. But padded armor, very old thing. This isn't an arms and armor lesson today. We're talking about what to wear when we reenact. But something that's not too later period gambeson, closed front style. This is kind of typical of like a 12th century thing, maybe even later Norman. But you see how this provides amazing throat protection. And the gorget itself actually fits in here really good, providing hard throat protection. This would have been a much more affordable option. What most folks theorize, and I would definitely agree with, is that for armor, for the average soldier, wearing thick wool, linen, caftans, tunics, kirtles, would have provided a good amount of protection. It does, especially if it's layered. Fabric resists cuts quite well. We do know that gambeson can resist arrows and things like that. It's not a bad thing to wear. It'll really help. It dissipates damage quite a bit, and you're not jacking up the aesthetic. And if you have a gambeson, the next logical upgrade would be, your mail coat. So going with the gambeson, I think, is a good move. It's definitely a good move. If you really want to keep your tunic and period aesthetic, you can get a plastron. Those are pretty cheap, like $30. So you can wear a plastron under a nice fancy tunic, and you're going to be pretty well protected. Mail doesn't do a whole lot against the blunt force. It does though, but not a whole ton. So as a reenactor, it doesn't serve you that well because you're not really facing sharp weapons. So you're better having the padding. It's nice not to have to ruin a tunic with the rust of your mail, ruin a gambeson for it. So definitely consider getting a gambeson. Next thing, which if you're watching this and you've been somewhat familiar with Viking reenactment combat, is you're going to see things like this. Like these Armadillo type gloves. This is one that I made. Works okay. Thumb is a little finicky, so this isn't suited for all weapons in my opinion. I don't see a big issue with rocking things like this. It doesn't really jack up the aesthetic, in my opinion. There is some other alternatives that I think provide more protection, but you have to kind of blur the historical lines like a little bit. One of those would be a male mitten. So this male mitten has got a gambeson core to it, and it's wrapped in full mail. So I've taken a few pretty hard hits on this, and it didn't jack me up. You know, this is not going to really ruin your aesthetic out on the battlefield. And I think it actually looks a little more warrior society than these Armadillo type gloves. I've seen some pretty crudely made ones. I wouldn't really trust my hand to it. Even though I made this, wouldn't really trust my hand. I wouldn't like to take a heavier axe strike with this, but like a single-handed Viking sword with this, probably be pretty alright. Same thing with a thrust from a spear. If it happened to hit me, I'd be pretty okay. So I like this just because I can hold the hilt of my Viking sword pretty well. I don't like those big oversized hilts. They make the Viking sword's handle really funky. So this is really why I got this, because I was having a hard time using my sword against people, and I was just going to run into trouble. So this was pretty good. And what I do also like about this, since it's flexible, it can act as your shield hand glove quite easily. And there is a chance of your hand getting hurt behind that shield, especially when you get in range with somebody. Your hand and arm can be a target quite a bit. So this doesn't have great finger protection necessarily, but the thumb is pretty encased since the thumb is a lot smaller than the piece itself. So if I did take a strong hit, my thumb is pretty tucked in here. Plus my fingertips aren't that exposed. Sometimes a lot of gloves have your fingertips hanging out once you make a grip, and this isn't so bad with that. I believe these are Lord of Battles as well. Same brand as the collared gorget and the arming cap. Also from Cult of Athena. Not a bad move. They were a little shoddy out of the package. This isn't a review of these, but stitching was coming undone already. But I expect to have to mend armor and kit every so often. It kind of comes along with the territory. One interesting thing that I did acquire a while ago is some plate armor. Now, I use this for my shield hand, so this isn't going to be very visible during a lot of the fights. But the way a Viking shield is, a lot of your fingers are hanging out since your actual handle goes on the outside of the shield. Yeah, your knuckles are inside the boss, but your actual fingers themselves are hanging out. It's quite problematic. You know, we don't hold our shield straight in front of us. When we're doing melee or duels, they're usually at that angle on our shoulder. They're kind of ear to shoulder. So that hand can take some pretty serious strikes. And it's already gripping a piece of wood. It's a great way to get your finger practically chopped off. So these, you can't really see them once I'm holding the shield. They function pretty damn well. This came from Medieval Ukraine. I think it's called Medieval UA on Etsy. So we pretty much covered some of the basic stuff here. You got to cover your hands. You got to wear a mouth guard, guard your neck, guard your groin. Try to bulk up on your helmet situation. Try to start to cover your neck if you can. That padded collar is not a bad option. Try to take the time to make your kit aesthetically pleasing. Do your very best to be accurate. Focus on guarding yourself. Consider more internal padding than external. Just do your very best out there. That's all I could really say. Hopefully some of this advice was helpful. We'll see you next time.